Hello Internet and welcome to Your Call here on FeckTV.com. We're live this evening on this very cold Monday evening. I'm Noel Byrne and joining me tonight is Chris Bennett. We're discussing the dark underbelly of the Internet tonight. It's a topic you might not know a lot about, but in 15-20 minutes time we'll certainly have you well educated. But whether or not you'll be glad you know it or not is a different story. It's a worrying world out there on the dark net, as it's called, or the deep web. And remember, if you want to get in contact this evening, you can do so on our social media sites, on Twitter, and FeckTV is the name there, or indeed on Facebook as well. Just check out FeckTV. Chris, in terms of the dark net, did you know much about this before?
Frankly, no, Noel. I suppose before we got onto this topic, I knew nothing. I was a noob, I suppose, to use the parlance of the web. But I knew nothing about it. But once I dug a little bit under the surface, it was pretty shocking.
Yeah, well, I suppose to kind of, get people up to speed on it. For the most part, people, when they spend their time on the internet, they're on what they call the surface web, which, will be Facebook and Google and Yahoo and all the various websites that you'd use on a daily basis. However, that is a very small fraction of the internet, and the majority of it is we'll say undiscovered. It's what Google and the likes of Bing can't see, so they're the results that don't come up on your search engines.
The tip of a very large iceberg.
Exactly. But tonight we're looking at the larger side to that iceberg. Absolutely. And it is quite worrying. I suppose it's called the Tor Browser, which started off as the Onion router.
Yeah, which was actually created by the United States Naval Research Laboratory, strangely enough, in the 1990s.
Yes, it was set up as a way of we'll say armies and military groups using it as a communication device.
It's like an encryption.
Yeah, because
encoding device.
When you log on to the Tor browser, you're completely anonymous. It's really, really difficult to track a trace. So obviously it came in handy for the likes of, we'll say, spies who might be in countries that aren't meant to be there, being able to communicate with their government or whoever their particular group may be. So that's how it began. Now, it sounds like, a useful tool, but I suppose, like all things, it eventually became quite corrupt.
Yeah, I suppose people took the lid off Pandora's box, and now that it's there, now that it's open, it's very difficult to put that back on again.
Yes, and now it is still being funded by the likes of the US government, the Swedish government. There are other organisations.
My favourite was the National Science Foundation.
Yes, you see, it has
like a veneer of respectability.
Exactly.
Which, I suppose in some ways, there is that side to it, the side that allows people, activists, for instance, around the world, people in the Arab Spring, to send communications, blogs, diaries, messages to people whilst maintaining their anonymity. So that's obviously, one good side to this.
Yes, exactly. Unfortunately, it has been corrupted over the last 10 years. The first aspect we're going to look at tonight is drugs, because they are widely available on the dark web, on websites such as the Silk Road, High Times Emporium, and we'll show you images as we have our discussion tonight.
One software developer who did actually buy drugs over the Silk Road site said it kind of felt like I was in the future.
Yeah, well, Silk Road is an interesting case, because Silk Road is pretty much like eBay. There's various products on there. A lot of it is drugs, but there are other illegal products you can purchase as well, whether it be passports or money or knives or things like that.
In terms of money, Noel, I mean, how much is actually made from these sites?
It's thought on Silk Road that it's give or take 2 million a month, but it's hard to pin down, because we'll say, unlike the likes of eBay or Amazon, they don't release their financial statements on a yearly basis, but people can also join the website as they wish.
Now, in terms of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, well, this is Silk Road, and as you can see, there's just various drugs you can buy. There's the likes of heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, meth. You can also buy hash, we'll say what we call the softer drugs, but there are an awful lot of hardcore drugs that people can buy.
And cookies.
Hash cookies as well, there you go. But they're very easily got. You literally just go on, you choose whatever product you want and click add to cart, and we'll say the likes of eBay, there are sellers' ratings on there as well, so you can judge for yourself, oh, is this a safe person to buy these drugs
I suppose
from?
now something I found out about this was that the users on the Silk Road might actually end up paying more than they would to, let's say, buy it on the street from a dealer, for instance. I suppose some of that is that they're paying for convenience, I suppose for security almost, because a lot of these things get shipped in sort of fairly innocuous packaging that obviously the person can then deny all responsibility of.
Exactly. It'd be just like if you went onto Amazon and decided you wanted to buy a DVD, except in this case you might be buying 40 ecstasy tablets. Just like, as in, I was having a look today, you know, you can buy e-tablets for $10, LSD $12 for one tablet. Meth was quite expensive at $100. I say it's expensive. I presume it's expensive. I've never had to. I never
knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. You can also buy, we'll say, prescription drugs like the likes of Valium that you'd have to obviously go to a doctor to get. That would be about $7 a pill. But it's scary to think it's that straightforward. I mean, I could order that as quickly as I would order, you know, the next season of Smallville or something. Yeah,
and I suppose that is one of the things to sort of come back to in terms of how easy is it actually. You know, we've talked about how easy it is to buy these things from almost eBay type sites. How easy is it to actually get access to the system itself, the Tor network?
It's quite straightforward. You literally go onto the likes of your Google and you download the Tor browser. So, you know, you'd have it downloaded in less than 5 minutes. You then just click Start Tor and it kicks in. It uses whatever internet connection you're working on, and then it makes you anonymous and it automatically opens up your browser, which is modeled on Firefox. The websites themselves, they don't work like the traditional, we'll say, .com or .eu or .ie. It's all .onion, hence why it's called the Onion router. Exactly, the layers as well. So every website is .onion, but it's not like, you know, chrisbennett.onion. It'll be, you know, jxk3rs.onion. So the websites don't actually have distinguishable names.
So it is sort of, it is layer upon layer of mystique and sort of ruse almost. Yeah. In terms of, I suppose, regulation of this, because obviously, you know, huge amounts of illegal things are going on. We've touched on drugs briefly now. You know, can it be regulated in any way? Obviously, via authorities, you know, police, law enforcement agencies. Can they get on there? Can they regulate this in any way? Can it be shut down?
It can't really, Chris, because as you said, they kind of opened Pandora's box, and it's been going now for, give or take, you know, 10 years, and it's just become too unwieldy at this stage. Everything is mirrored on the Tor network, which means if you're not into that type of lingo, the website may exist in one place, but it could also exist in 100 or 200 or 1,000 other places as well. So you can access it from all over the place, and it works through various servers, so everything's not on the same one. Or might be part of the website might be, we'll say, in India, another part might be in England. So it's too colossal to manage in that sense. So it'd be really hard for any authorities, we'll say, to tackle the whole thing full on.
In terms of obviously, as we touched on drugs, what sort of other things could we expect to find?
Well, I suppose another aspect that would affect, we'll say, the normal user of the internet a bit more is the financial services aspect, or the money on it, we'll say, because you always hear of cases of people's credit cards and their PINs being stolen, but they could actually be for sale on the dark net. Because you can go on there and you can choose, there's various links that you can go into, and they basically sell credit card pins, hacked PayPal accounts. Like I mentioned earlier, you can buy bundles of money as well. So you could, unbeknownst to yourself, your credit card and all the associated details could actually be on the deep web.
Yeah, and I suppose someone could take those, buy these bundles of money, for instance, and launder it that way. I suppose the one thing to think about in terms of the financial services side of things is that at least if you can catch it early enough, you do have, I suppose, some form of protection there from your banks, from the regulators, from the section. You can sort of potentially get your money back.
Yeah, I suppose it'd be worrying for people because they don't know what their money is being used for. We'll say
no, especially if it went into the more illegal side.
Yeah, and as we'll see in a bit as well, like, it can get quite scary, the dark web, and where your money could be used. One such place could be the purchase of weapons. which are also widely available on the deep web. I mean, machine guns, ammunition, grenades, snipers.
Yeah,
it's all there, and much like the drugs, very, very easy to purchase.
That's right. Nairan Tulsi from the South African Mail and Guardian actually said you can apparently find everything you would need to take over a country or break away from an existing one to form your own.
It's very well put, Chris, because that is definitely the case. As you can see on the images we're showing you as well, someone said there is someone is selling an arsenal of improvised weapons. I mean, you can buy explosives that you could use. So we'd say likes of countries like Syria, where there would be trouble there, if they had access to something like the Tor browser, they could be importing weapons to help their cause.
One of my favourites, shall we say, when I was sort of investigating this a little bit further, was one chap who, along with selling or trying to sell 100 pounds of C4 plastic explosive, which he'd obviously somehow got hold of. He was also selling a homemade guide on how to make someone feel bad, which he listed under weaponry as it's an attack on the mind. Which shows there is a sort of a humorous side to it, but then along with that, he was also selling
explosives.
Could blow up, anything. Buildings.
If the attack on the mind didn't work. Don't forget, you can join in on the debate this evening on Twitter or on Facebook. On Twitter, John Darrer's been on. He said, if I was looking for a kidney, is there any organ trading? What is the worst thing you can get on there? No organ trading that was visible, but again, there's so many layers to the deep web that without a doubt it is on there somewhere, but I didn't come across it in my findings, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The worst thing on there we're going to get to in a while. Yeah. And it is quite scary. I
suppose along with the weaponry, another side of it was that you could actually hire contract killers.
Yes, this was a strange one, and we show you the websites here now as we're discussing it as well. There was one website called Quick Kill. For $20,000, it would kill whoever you wanted, as long as they were.
If I was going to kill you, for instance, Noel, 20 grand.
They target regular citizens, not political figures, as other websites would. You have to give up 50% beforehand, and then the other 50 afterwards.
It almost, when you read some of these, it almost reads like a plot from a film. It's like Leon, no women, no kids kind of thing, or the payment comes half up front, half after the job's complete. It does read as a film, but yet when you actually sort of drill into it a bit deeper, it's incredibly worrying that there are people out there willing to do these things for what appear to be, in some cases, quite low amounts of money. The price of human life, let's say, is quite cheap.
It is very cheap. And as you can see on screen at the moment, there was one person who's selling themselves as a contract killer, and they're modelling their guns, I suppose, that they could use to carry out the tasks. That person is in the US. It's quite, not funny, but it's strange, as in there are certain morals they do have. Like some are like, they'll kill men and women but not children. Others are like men and women in groups but not children. It seems to be a lot of them just will not kill children. And they have to be of a certain age as well. One website said the person would have to be at least over 18, another said at least 16. Looking at some of the prices on another website, I mean, they said they'd kill a member of the paparazzi for 50,000, 100 grand they'd kill a journalist if you wanted them knocked off. A criminal or a cop, they'd kill them for between 50 and 100,000. It's just mad that on the internet, the same place that's, you're updating your status on Facebook, someone is offering to kill, your neighbour.
The thing that, I suppose, researching all of this, the thing that shocked me the most about it was the ease of it all. The fact that the big attraction there is how simple it is, how easy it is to get hold of these things. And what was worrying was that, essentially anybody now, with enough money and enough nous to go into this, could become anything. They could become a contract killer themselves. They could buy a gun easily. You can buy chloroform, you could buy explosives, you could buy all sorts of things that would essentially enable, allow you to create mass, destruction quite easily.
Very easily, Chris, and I suppose in some ways that brings us on to the next section of our discussion, which is a website that I came across on the deep web, which was funding for Islamic terrorists. It's a website called Fund the Islamic Struggle Without Leaving a Trace. Again, you can't just Google it. You have to come across this specific address, and it's a group in the US, and they're seeking funding and facilities to train Muslims as terrorists in the US and South America, which I suppose is quite apt, excuse me, following what David Cameron said today.
Yeah, absolutely, about, you know, the rise of this going on. And also, I've been looking at the weaponry and this kind of stuff. You know, you'll see President Obama putting forth weapons legislation, talking over, obviously, the hostage crisis, etc., about going forward and attacking terrorism sort of head on. But when you've got sites here where people can buy weapons quite easily, where people can fund this terrorist activity, it's very difficult to see where that legislation can actually stop this kind of thing.
Yeah, in some ways, you know, the legislation is worthless because, as you said, you know, everything is just so easily bought on there that people who might be pro-guns and whatnot, they can just buy them on there anyway if they can't buy them in, you know, a local store, or if they want to bypass the checks that look to be introduced. I suppose as well that there'd be several terrorist rings operating on the Tor network.
I suppose, obviously, though, at the same time, there's probably a lot of, let's see, you know, Western spies, Western counter-terrorism probably also operating within the Tor network. One would hope, certainly.
Yeah, well, hopefully, I suppose they always said like the web would would eventually become, you know, the main interface for terrorism, and it certainly looks that way on the dark web anyway. Moving on, though, and another worrying aspect, and I suppose as we get down to the most vile aspects of the deep web, and I suppose ones that would leave you most worried about humanity, really, and see how deprived we can become. I stumbled across a human experiment section of the website. And
it's not mad scientist type of stuff, it's pretty real, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, it'd leave some scary images in your head, but this particular website claimed that they had 4 warehouses which could be used for human experiments, and it's understood that they use the neglected members of society to carry out these experiments. Again, you don't know if the people who are carrying these out are medically trained, or if it's just, you know, people who aren't just fully with it that are carrying out these. But to give you an idea of one of the experiments that the website claims to have carried out in one of its warehouses is an experiment to test bleach and fetus tolerance. They had 3 people involved. There was a 17-year-old girl, a 20-year-old and a 29-year-old woman. This particular woman, she had no known past medical history. She was impregnated by artificial insemination. The experiment, as I said, was in relation to bleach tolerance and the fetus. To do this, they injected the woman's uterus with 10 millilitres of bleach on a daily basis, and the fetus was aborted on day 5 of the experiment.
Yeah, I mean, pretty drastic stuff, pretty horrible stuff. It's almost
leaves you speechless to a point that
it really does. And
that this type of thing is
it
happening.
almost, I suppose, would lead in. You know, the conspiracy theorists would be fueled there, saying that if this kind of stuff went on, these illegal experimentation stuff, would that lead them to think that, you know, big pharmaceutical would be involved? You know, the human testing trials under the radar of, let's say, you know, the drugs law enforcement agencies, etc. Does this sort of stuff go on? It's difficult, and as you've said time and time again, the problem here is these people can't be traced. These people can't be tackled and brought down to justice unless, I suppose, physically by the people if they're seen outside of the web.
Yeah, well, you'd hope that, you know, something will be able to be done eventually, because as we move on to the final segment now, I suppose with something that's as anonymous as the dark web, that you'd always imagine there would be an awful lot of porn on there. And you'd be right, there is. I suppose in some ways you can call it, there'd be the traditional porn that you'd expect on normal websites. As you can see on screen at the moment, there's a crazy amount of websites you can access. Don't forget that there are many, many more, but these are the main ones that the browser says, you know, that are kind of worth visiting, I suppose. But there is the non-commercial, what they term as non-commercial porn, which would be just your average videos and pictures and whatever. Some of them are just disgusting as well, like genital mutilation. Worrying on 2 fronts, I suppose. One, that it's been carried out, and 2, that there are actually people interested in it. Then there are more commercial aspects as well, where you can actually access passwords to various porn websites that you'd find on the normal web. You'd pay a little money and you'd have access to the hundreds and thousands of websites that do exist. Then it starts to get a bit scary, I suppose. There are lists of underage websites you can use, and for paedophiles that they'd use as well. And then there is also paraphile websites, which are a bit more weirder stuff that people are into, whether it's involving animals and things like that. There was one section called Vor, which was people who got their kicks out of being chewed on while they were sexually aroused.
So, I mean, what we're really saying is that you know, whilst the internet, on the surface of it, is some pretty horrible stuff, what the darknet does is really does plumb the depths of depravity here.
Yeah, there was one ad I noticed on a message board that said, you know, it was someone looking for a sex slave. They were advertising that they needed someone who was Asian, at least 18 years, so they were literally asking someone to find them a sex slave and help find one. Niall O'Brennan's been on. He said, are these the sites where they find the pedo rings? They are indeed. Niall, I suppose it's worth mentioning that Anonymous found out about the paedophilic aspects of the dark net, and they tackled a website called Lolita City as part of their Operation Darknet. And they told those using the website that if they didn't shut everything down, that they would release the information of all the people who were using it. The website did not shut down, so Anonymous released all the information of those who had logged on to the website, who provided material. Most worryingly, it found that the person who set up the website had over 100 gigabytes of child porn.
The sad thing here, though, is that whilst brilliant that Anonymous did do this and did obviously sort of expose this, and it was a story that was picked up on by major news networks that sort of brought this a little bit more to light. The fact is, though, that it's still essentially still self-regulated. You do need, let's say, a slightly courageous or a slightly morally minded hacking group to actually come in and do anything like that.
Yeah, as they said themselves, Anonymous, they said, you know, the police and the governments just weren't able to do enough. They needed to step in. They didn't want the unheard screams of children to go unnoticed, so this is why they carried it out. But unfortunately, there are still several websites rampant on the dark web that exist. One of the images we would have showed you there a few minutes ago is a website called Violent Desires. Now, I didn't access this, not that I'd want to anyway, but apparently it's for people who are, we'll say, VIPs, that if, you know, you can only get access if you are a VIP, and by VIP they mean that you have to actually provide material of children,
yeah, so you're not
being sexually assaulted.
You are actually contributing.
Yes, exactly. That's the only way you can gain access to it. And I mean, some of the topics being discussed on there are crazy. I'll just lift some off for you, and these are straight from the website. One is chloroform, how to make it. 11-year-old could use some help. As in, they have an 11-year-old, not an 11-year-old, looking for help. Planning on raping a kid or a girl, my age, 16-year-old here. Long-term storage. Remember, this is in relation to child pornography. Pics of snuffed kids. Abducting my object of lust while on vacation abroad. Literally, these topics are absolutely disgusting. That people are, openly discussing these on these websites.
How worried should we be about this? You know, I suppose something like that, obviously there is a huge amount of vile stuff going on in the dark web. Probably if this was exposed, some of these people would say, oh, they're talking about, oh, it's just fantasies or something like that, if images weren't found. How worried should people, let's say, the people out there who are actually watching this show, who would use the internet in a, let's say, in a normal way, how worried should we actually be about the dark web?
I think, as we've kind of alluded to this evening, Chris, it's become so unwieldy at this stage that, you know, I don't think it can be stopped, because there's so many mirrors of the various websites, as much as Anonymous would like to, or the various police and authorities around the world, as much as they clamp down on various aspects of it. I just think it's going to keep on growing. It's
self-perpetuating.
Exactly. It's just too big at this stage. I don't think it can be stopped. I suppose the one warning is for anyone out there who, you know, may want to check out the dark web, it's just to be very, very careful in terms of what you access. Obviously, majority of what's on there is illegal. We in no way condone what's happening on there either. We just wanted to expose and, I suppose, highlight to people that what is going on out there, and just to be very, very careful if you do use it. But yeah, it's definitely worrying times ahead, Chris, would be my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'd hasten to agree with you there, Noel.
Yeah, okay, that's it for tonight. Thanks a million for watching. Don't forget, we're back tomorrow night as well on FecTV.com. We'll talk to you then.